I want to read to you the words of Douglas Murray, who has reacted to Joe Biden's betrayal of Israel. Let's just be blunt. It's a betrayal, where he said that if they go into an offensive in Rafa, then the United States will not supply arms. If they do what they need to do just to get rid of the terrorist threat on their doorstep. And yes, there will be civilian casualties. That's Hamas's fault. That's not Israel's fault. Israel has to do what they need to do. The fact that civilians are going to get hurt, quite frankly, they are the responsibility of Hamas, and they also have a responsibility in their society to call for their government to cease fire and to stop and to resist, or to turn themselves into the IDF and say, we don't want a part of this. We can't take away all their moral agency and put every single issue on Israel's doorstep when Israel has their own people to protect. But Biden doesn't see it like that. I don't know whether it's because he actually believes what he says or because he just feels that this is what he needs to do to pander to the anti-Israel mob to win the next election. But either way, it's wrong, and I want to read to you the words of Douglas Murray. Here's what he says. What a difference a day makes. On Tuesday, President Biden was speaking at the Holocaust Memorial Museum commemoration at the Capitol in Washington. There he drew a direct comparison between the events of the Holocaust and the attacks of Israel on October 7th. This is not my comparison, it was President Biden's. Talking about the phrase, never again, he said, here we are, not 75 years later, but just 7.5 months later, and people are already forgetting. They're already forgetting that Hamas unleashed this terror. It was Hamas who brutalized Israelis. It was Hamas who took and continues to hold hostages. I have not forgotten, nor have you, and we will not forget. As I say, what a difference a day makes. Within hours, the same president who uttered those words was attempting to prevent Israel's victory in Gaza. By withholding arms shipments to Israel, Biden made it clear he does not want Israel to achieve its military objectives in the final battle of Rafa. Opponents of the war have briefed for months about the need for a pause or a ceasefire, but there has been an effective pause for months as Israel has waited for this push into Hamas' final stronghold. Really good point. It is believed that Rafa is the place where the remaining Israeli hostages are being held, and the place where Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of October 7th attacks, is hiding. Most likely surrounded by the best hostages, which to his sick mind would include the remaining child captives. Never again, indeed. If the Israeli army does not destroy Hamas in Rafah, then the war is effectively for nothing. And all the pain and grief on all sides might as well have not occurred. As I've said before, there is no point in putting out 80% of a fire until the Israeli army can clear Hamas out of Rafah. The fire of Gaza is not out. That's a really important point, by the way. I'm just going to pause for a second because what people think is, well, the death toll's too high. That's not the way you determine the death toll. If you go 80%, but then you don't finish the job and allow Hamas to rearm and regroup, then those people that have so far died in vain. They don't die in vain when you achieve peace. That's the point that people miss because they have such childish moral compasses. I'll continue. But Biden seems to be bowing to pressure from some of his own base. As someone joked a few months back, Biden does indeed want to focus on a two-state solution, but the two states are Minnesota and Michigan. He is desperate to chase the few tens of thousands of voters who might turn on him because they care about Hamas more than they care about America. What else has pushed the issue of arming Israel up the list of priorities? Perhaps the Biden administration is bowing to the unsustainable pressure of a few overweight students threatening to hunger strike for Hamas. I'm sure Hamas are touched by the solidarity. Perhaps he finds it impossible not to yield to the demands of Queers for Palestine and the other weirdos who are ruining this academic year for so many sensible American students. But I see no reason why a superpower should be affected in its alliances by a few screaming, entitled know-nothings at a small number of overprivileged campuses. Most of these people are paid agitators anyway. Yet the pressure seems to have got to Biden. How else to explain his decision to hold up arms supplies to Israel just hours after giving that speech on Tuesday? On Thursday evening, the War Cabinet in Israel was meeting to discuss the next stage of the war, and presumably also to work out what to do if the country's chief ally abandons Israel now. One of the people in the room stepped out to speak to me yesterday evening. I asked the Israeli official what they thought about the idea that their country of 10 million people had now been left to fight alone against the forces of terrorism. The reply? It seems that the leader of the free world is the prime minister of a 10 million person country. What an indictment of the situation that Biden has led America to. At the beginning of his term in office, President Biden performed his famously bungled withdrawal from Afghanistan. After 2 decades and thousands of lost American lives, Afghanistan was effectively back to where it was 20 years earlier. While the Taliban took Afghanistan, it was as if America and her allies had never been there. The schools shut again, the Taliban dealt with their enemies, and all the blood and treasure was for nothing. At this point, Biden reminded the world that America is not always the worst enemy. Now, in withdrawing supplies to its principal ally in the Middle East, Biden is at risk of showing that America is also not the best friend. How to explain this disconnect? Between the warm and strong words that Biden utters and the betraying stance he is now taking? Only that he has bowed to domestic political pressure here in America. Who knows what effect that will have in November? Perhaps the pro-Hamas lobby in a couple of states will be pleased to have some of their way. Perhaps they will be jubilant, forgive Biden for the months in which he was a strong ally of Israel, and vote for him anyway. Or perhaps they will stay at home, or vote for someone else. In any case, what a price to pay in international leadership for such a small, sordid domestic political pressure. There will be serious consequences from this, because for months Biden has stressed, rightly, that the fight Israel is engaged in is a fight the whole civilized world is engaged in. For months, he said that he would be unwavering in his support for America's ally. And for months, he has reassured Israelis, as he did again this week, that he would not forget the horrors of October 7th or the Israelis and Americans still in Hamas captivity. And now we have this. A decision to cut Israel off just before the point at which it can win. In Afghanistan, Biden piled defeat upon defeat. With Israel, it looks like he wants to steal defeat from the jaws of victory. So it is Israel alone, as Biden has sworn it would not be. Actions speak louder than words. And I think that final line nails the point. It's about what you do in the end. It's one thing to say we'll stand by our allies. It's one thing to say never again. Well, never again is now. And what are you actually going to do? The issue of Israel being alone, as Rabbi Friedman said, the truth is the Jewish people have always been alone. And in that we can take refuge and strength, because the Jewish people are the eternal nation. And we should do whatever we need to do to protect ourselves. And if we don't have if the Jewish people and Israel do not have America's support, but have America's dependence, conditional support, then perhaps this entire relationship needs to be evaluated again. But let's never forget that, in the end, those who turn their backs on Israel turn their backs on themselves, and in the end, face bad consequences for that. Love to know your thoughts. Please do comment on the video with your thoughts on Douglas's words. Please like, please share, and do whatever you can to get the word out. Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.